everyone. Welcome back to Wait, It Gets Better. It's been a few months since episode 51. And let me explain my absence. When I saw the news that ICE ads were being run on here, I decided to leave. And in the wake of the murder of Renee Nicole Good at the hands of ICE agents, Spotify decided to stop running ads. And with this topic I've had planned for like months now, being about mental health of survivors of murder victims, I'm taking the opportunity to put out information to help those who are grieving the loss of their murdered loved one. Now, without getting political, because you guys know I do not get political on here for mental health reasons, let me send my heartfelt condolences out to the family of Renee Nicole Good. Like I said, say her name. She deserves to be remembered. It was a senseless act at the hands of an ICE agent, and I pray there will be justice. Now, me leaving Spotify based off of the ads being run for ICE is now justified when we see something like this occurring, besides the plethora of senseless acts being committed at the hands of ICE. Now, please keep reminding yourselves this too shall pass. I know action needs to be taken to eradicate the violence and chaos, but for now, in the moment, tell yourself this too shall pass. We are living in extremely chaotic times and things need to change. And like I said, I will not get political on here because with all the craziness going on in the world right now, sometimes people need an outlet to just forget all of that and listen to something that is gonna, help them, and it's gonna help them forget what's going on right now. And it's, that's why I don't talk about politics on here. Like I always say, you look at my other platforms, you will see where I stand politically, but on here specifically, this is where I talk about things that are going to help people. I try to relate to people with stories from my life. I do this. I don't even get paid to do this. I do this because I want to help people. I genuinely care about people who want to listen to what I have to say. And you know what I mean? Like we're all being divided by politics right now. But at the end of the day, what we all have in common is mental health. And I love coming on here to help people. Like I say, I don't look at the analytics. I don't know if it's some of you, none of you, or all of you that are listening, but I do this to help people. And I do this with hopes that one person is listening and that what I say is really helping people. So now today's topic is the survivors of murder victims and their mental health. And with that, involving grief as one of the main topics. Now, grief is a very complex emotion. And before I dive into the topic, these past few months have been, let me keep you updated on these past few months. Since the last episode, I was struggling with my sciatica. I had a lot of pain going on and it was just a struggle. I finally went to the doctor. I got help for it. My doctor was a big help in figuring out like what I needed to do to combat it. Also, I spent a lot of these past few months like reaching out to family members who are grieving a lot, or it was the holiday time. It was, from like October up until like December, and even now, like I was spending time reaching out to family members who had just recently lost somebody or who had lost someone, and they're going through like a happy time in their life. So it was a bittersweet time in their life. So I always checked on them, So grief, I definitely want to tackle in a future episode in regards to like different aspects of it, because like I said, grief is a very, very complex emotion. Many different avenues of grief. There's grief where it comes with emotions where somebody committed suicide. Today's topic is where somebody is murdered. Like there's many complex emotions that come with grief. But for today, we're talking about grief that comes with people when they are like family members. Okay, let me I'm like wording it like word jumble. It's the grief that comes along with somebody being murdered. And, there's like so many different, grief is a very lifelong journey. It's a lot of complex emotions come with it. So let's dive in. Now, this is my first episode back in a while. So I'm kind of rusty with how to dive into this topic. I started writing it on like Friday, but I was kind of busy. Like Saturday, we went for my niece's communion dress fitting, and then Saturday night, she slept over. I was in charge of her, like watching her and hanging out with her. And then Sunday, I was just exhausted because she would not go to bed. I love that kid, but she would not go to bed. So I was just tired Sunday. I spent Sunday just resting. Today I decided to write it, and I was like, I'm kind of rusty with it because I haven't done it in a few months, but I also wanted to cover a lot of different things because, like I said, grief when it comes to having a murdered loved one comes with a lot of complex emotions. And also, like, there's many different avenues of the way somebody passed away from murder. And, like, there's so many different, like, there's like people who have passed on from hate crimes. There are people who have passed on from mass shootings. There's so many different, and that's just naming a few. There's so many different things. Like I said, I'm going to try to tackle as much as I possibly could. If I missed anything, I apologize. It wasn't on purpose. This episode, I'm giving my best, and giving my best is enough. And I really am trying my hardest with this episode. So let's dive in. Now, this is what the research says when it says grief after a murder, grief coming from a loved one being murdered. So, grief after a murder is fundamentally different because it's sudden, violent, and traumatic, involving a third party perpetrator, which brings intense anger, fear, safety concerns, feelings of powerlessness, and complex emotions like guilt and deep need for justice, often complicated by legal processes, media, and stigma, leading to more severe PTSD, complicated grief, and prolonged distress compared to natural loss. Survivors grapple with incomprehensible why questions and often feel isolated without closure and haunted by the horror. Now, here are the key differences in homicide grief. Sudden and violent nature. Death is abrupt, often brutal, and leaves no chance for goodbye, shattering the survivor's sense of safety and meaning. The third party perpetrator. The involvement of another person introduces the intense rage and a need for justice and a constant fear of re victimization. Trauma and PTSD. The event itself traumatic, leading to PTSD symptoms like flashbacks, nightmares, and hypervigilance intertwined with grief. Complicated emotions. Beyond sadness, expect overwhelming anger, guilt, feeling they should have protected the victim, terror and profound helplessness, and systemic challenges. Dealing with law enforcement, media, and the court system adds layers of stress, potential blame, stigma, and prolonged, often unsatisfying legal process. The lack of closure, the why, often remains unanswered, and the perpetrator may never be caught, making acceptance incredibly difficult. And social isolation. Survivors can feel alienated by friends, family, or society who may not understand the unique horror or may stigmatize them. And the unique experiences and challenges. Safety concerns, constant worry about personal and family safety, distrust, pervasive distrust of strangers in the world, physical symptoms, intense physical reactions like headaches, stomach issues, here we go again, guys. Buckle up, because me mispronouncing words or messing up on the words. Sleep disturbances. I bet you missed that. Profound anger, intense rage directed at perpetrator, oneself, or even the system. Narrative trauma. Vivid, intrusive images and retelling the story become central to healing, as noted in research. In essence, this is what the research is saying. In essence, murder-based grief isn't just about the loss. It's about the violent disruption of life by a human agent, creating a complex trauma response layered into natural bereavement. Now, I asked about the trauma that comes with being a survivor of a murder victim, and this is what the research says. Survivors of homicide victims face severe complex trauma, often developing post-traumatic stress disorder, intense grief, depression, anxiety, and substance issues stemming from the violent, unexpected loss and re-traumatization of navigating the justice system and media. Symptoms include flashbacks, nightmares, anger, guilt, hopelessness, and isolation, with children and teens experiencing significant behavioral changes. Support like counseling, victim advocacy, and support groups is crucial for managing these overwhelming, often prolonged emotional psychological impacts. Common mental health impacts: post-traumatic stress disorder, intrusive memories, flashbacks, nightmares, hypervigilance, avoidance, emotional numbness, and intense fear, depression and anxiety, deep sadness, hopelessness, irritability, restlessness, and significant mood swings, and complex grief, prolonged anger, guilt, emptiness, and difficulty processing the loss due to violent nature, substance abuse, increased use of alcohol and drugs to cope with the trauma, and physical symptoms, fatigue, sleep problems, appetite changes, and body aches. Now, factors exacerbating trauma, the justice system, lengthy investigations, court appearances, and invasive legal processes can re-traumatize survivors, making them relive the event repeatedly. And media coverage, this is gonna mess me up. Sensationalized or detailed, I was going to have a struggle saying that word. Sensationalized or detailed news reports can intensify distress and unresolved justice. Lack of perpetrator identification or conviction can leave survivors feeling unsettled and empty. And specific challenges for youth. Children and teens may exhibit behavioral issues, changes in friendships, and struggle to understand the tragedy, with their grief manifesting cyclically. If I said that correctly, if I butchered that, I apologize. Coping support needs, professional help, therapy, trauma focused counseling, psycho emotional support, and victim assistance services are vital. Support networks, connecting with other homicide survivors through groups provides validation and reduces isolation. And practical services, advocacy for navigating the justice system and accessing concrete resources, and also the crisis support. Immediate help is available via the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Now, the key takeaway to this is what the research is saying is experiencing a homicide is an abnormal trauma, and the intense reactions of survivors are normal responses to an abnormal event, often requiring specialized long-term support for healing. Now, this topic I was taking a minute to dive into because I didn't want to, like I said, I didn't want to leave any stone unturned. I wanted to include everyone on this topic. And now I looked up the mental health and the trauma involved in survivors of hate crime victims, and this is what it said. So let's dive into that. Hate crime survivors often, this is what the research is saying. Hate crime survivors often experience severe, lasting mental health impacts, including increased depression, anxiety, PTSD symptoms, anger, and shame due to the trauma of being targeted for their identity. These attacks create fear not just for the individuals but entire communities, leading to vicarious trauma and a diminished sense of safety, with effects potentially lasting longer than non-biased crimes. Unhealthy coping mechanisms, substance abuse, increased suicide risk are also concerns. Oh, I lost where I was going because I just saw a car driving past and I thought my dog was going to go crazy and ruin the recording. So, with effects lasting longer than non-biased crimes, unhealthy coping mechanisms, substance abuse, and increased suicide risks are also concerns, especially for LGBTQ plus and racial/ethnic minorities. Common mental health effects: post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, flashbacks, hypervigilance, difficulty concentrating, sleep appetite changes, and then we have depression and anxiety, feelings of hopelessness, persistent sadness, fear, and worry about future attacks, and racial trauma. A specific type of trauma from racial bias causing symptoms similar to PTSD, depression, and low self-esteem. So, let me finish this. Anger and shame, intense feelings of rage and humiliation, substance abuse, using drugs or alcohol to cope with trauma, and suicidal ideation. Heightened risk, particularly for vulnerable groups like the LGBTQ plus individuals. Why hate crimes are different. Targeted and symbolic. Attacks are meant to terrorize an entire group, not just the individual victim. And identity based. Victims are attacked for who they are, not who they are, race, religion, orientation, etc. There's more to that, making them feel unsafe in their own communities. And longer recovery. Psychological problems often resolve slower than in non-biased crimes, sometimes taking years. And community and secondary trauma, vicarious trauma. Members of the targeted group can experience trauma symptoms just by witnessing or hearing about the event. And ripple effects. The crime signals a hostile environment affecting the broader community's sense of belonging and safety. And coping and recovery. Seek support. Um, Connect with loved ones, anti-hate organizations, and mental health professionals, limit media, reduce exposure to news coverage and to lower stress, regain control, maintain routines, make choices to feel empowered, and legal protections. Laws protecting minorities have been linked to lower suicide rates, showing the importance of social support. And also, you can also, when you're looking to seek help, like for therapy, if you are a group, you are part of a community that is being targeted by people for like hate crimes, there is culturally competent therapists that you should seek out, because not every therapist you go to see, and I've learned this from doing other episodes where I educated myself on this. Culturally competent care, make sure you look for a therapist that is culturally competent within what you're going through, like somebody who we've talked about that. And let me actually, I'm going to Google this right now. What is culturally competent care? Let's see. So I can re-educate people. Culturally competent therapist. What is it? Let's see. So this is what it says. A culturally competent therapist understands, respects, and effectively works with clients from diverse backgrounds, recognizing how race, ethnicity, gender, religion, and other factors shape their identity and mental health experiences, while also being aware of their own biases and adapting treatment to honor the client's unique worldview for better outcomes. They practice cultural humility. They learn from clients, avoid stereotypes, and create a safe space for authentic expression, ensuring therapy feels relevant and trustworthy. So, definitely, if you are somebody who is, you know, a survivor of a victim of a hate crime, or if you're somebody who is in a community who is just, you're hearing about these things, or you're living these things, or you're a survivor of, if you survived somebody trying to commit a hate crime against you yourself, definitely look for some culturally competent care. 100%. Let me give you some key characteristics of a culturally competent therapist. Self-awareness. They recognize their own cultural background, biases, and assumptions on how to influence their work. Cultural knowledge. They understand different cultural norms, values, communication styles, and potential experiences like racial trauma. Skillful adaptation. They adjust therapeutic techniques and language to align with their client's cultural context, not just standard modalities. And cultural humility approaches therapy with a learning mindset, openness, and curiosity, treating clients as experts on their own lives. Excuse me. Respect and empathy demonstrate genuine respect for differences and create inclusive, non-judgmental space where clients can feel seen and heard. And they also focus on lived experience. They acknowledges how intersecting identities, like being a queer person of color, impact mental health and daily challenges, and it builds trust, a therapeutic alliance, and reduces client dropout, and ensures therapy addresses the client's specific struggles, such as family pressure or identity conflict, and it prevents misinterpretation or pathologizing cultural expression of emotion. So 100%, if you are somebody who is seeking help dealing with being a, surviving victim of a hate crime, if you are somebody who lost a loved one to a hate crime, if you are somebody in the community who is affected by, just in general, you know what I'm talking about. Definitely seek culturally competent care. I learned a lot about it in doing previous episodes, and it's good to know, and I'm passing it on because not a lot of people know about that. People just seek regular therapy without knowing that there are therapists out there who are catered to their specific needs when it comes to their mental health. So definitely seek that out. And that was just me. This wasn't even in my notes. This was just me doing this off the cuff, because reading this as I'm going along, it definitely made me think like, wow, maybe I should give some information about the culturally competent care. So let's get back into it. Coping and recovery. This is back in the research. Seek support. Connect with loved ones, anti-hate organizations, and mental health professionals. Oh, I think I read this already, but let me read it again. You can never be, if you're trying to help people, you can never go wrong with repeating it. Connect with loved ones, anti-hate organizations, and mental health professionals. Limit media. Reduce exposure to news coverage to lower stress. Definitely, I suggest doing like a digital detox, like going off of social media for a few days. I mean, I did one back in September after, the world was completely divided back in September. You know exactly what I'm talking about. We're still divided, but it was very intense back in September. And I just remember I'm like, I need to get off social media because this is really intense. Like, listen, it was really intense, and I was like, oh my God, it was stressing me out. So yeah, definitely a digital detox, 10 out of 10 recommended. I came back after 3 days completely calm, and I totally recommend it. Regain control, maintain routines, and make choices to feel empowered. And legal protections, laws protecting minorities have been linked to lower suicide rates, showing the importance of social support. Now, another topic we haven't tackled was the mental health of survivors of mass shootings. Now, before I talk about what's in my notes, um, within these past few months, or since Easter, there has been a lot of common reoccurrence of mass shooting survivors living through a second round of mass shootings. It's like a lot of people who dealt with it in their high school years are dealing with it now when they're in college. These are scary times we live in, you guys. And like I said, now let's dive into it. This is what the research says. Excuse me. The mental health of mass shooting survivors is different due to a combination of high initial PTSD prevalence rates, the public and often random nature of violence, media exposure, and the disruption of fundamental sense of safety in everyday places. Unique aspects of the trauma. Existential trauma and disrupted safety, unlike other forms of trauma that may be contained to specific contexts, mass shootings often occur in safe, everyday settings like schools, excuse me, schools, workplaces, or grocery stores. This intrusion on ordinary life creates an existential crisis, profoundly eroding a survivor's foundational belief in personal and public safety and making it difficult to feel secure anywhere. Um, Lack of anticipation. Survivors experience a combat like situation without any prior training, defenses, or anticipation that a soldier might have, intensifying the sense of helplessness and shock. Media exposure and re-traumatization. Intense, repeated, and graphic media coverage of mass shootings can lead to vicarious trauma for the general public, but for survivors, it often results in continuous re-traumatization, bringing painful memory to the surface repeatedly. And this is one, survivor guilt. Many survivors struggle with intense guilt for having lived while others, sometimes friends or family, died. This can be compounded by feelings of responsibility, such as believing they should have done more to stop the shooting or rescue others, and fractured social support. In mass shootings that occur in intimate settings like schools or workplaces, the trauma can fracture the existing support system. Friends, colleagues, families, because the people they would normally turn to are also victims or may be triggered by discussions of the event. This isolation can complicate the healing process. And common mental health outcomes, survivors exhibit high rates of mental health issues with symptoms that are often more severe and persistent compared to survivors of other types of interpersonal violence. Post-traumatic stress disorder, the rate of PTSD in people directly exposed to mass shootings can be as high as 36% among survivors. In some studies, up to 95% of exposed individuals report some PTSD symptoms in the immediate aftermath. And depression and anxiety. Major depressive episodes are common with rates higher than national averages and often co-occur with PTSD. Anxiety, panic disorders, and constant hypervigilance, a persistent fear of reoccurrence, are also prevalent. And physical and behavioral impacts. Survivors may experience chronic physical issues, sleep problems, and increased risk of substance use disorders. Children and adolescents are particularly vulnerable, with potential long-term impacts on their academic performance and future earnings. Ultimately, the unique combination of the event's public random nature and its challenge to fundamental assumptions about safety creates a distinct and profound mental health burden for mass shooting survivors. Now, like I said, I'm trying to cover all bases without a worry of timing because I really think within these past few months, there has been a lot in the news in regards to murder. And I know one of the murders that occurred, we, you know, the beloved Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle at the hands of their own son, which I am sure it comes with a lot of complicated emotions for his surviving children because it was at, like I said, it was at the hands of their son. So this is what the research said in regards to mental health and the murders committed by family or friends. So survivors of murders committed by family or friends face a complex and profound set of mental health challenges that go beyond typical bereavement. This unique situation involving a deep violation of trust leads to an elevated risk of developing serious psychological conditions like post traumatic stress disorder, depression, and complicated mourning. The unique mental health impacts. The mental health effects are intensified by the perpetrator's close relationship to the victim and the survivor. Profound betrayal and violation of trust. The crime shatters the survivor's sense of safety and order in the world as the violence comes from within their most trusted circle, even people living within their own home. Complicated grief. Normal mourning processes are interrupted and complicated by intense feelings of anger, guilt, and confusion directed at both the perpetrator. Oh my god, excuse me. Excuse me, I'm coughing. Whoa. Directed at both the perpetrator and sometimes the victim. Survivors may struggle with survivor's guilt, feeling they should have been able to prevent the death. Like, why didn't I see the signs sooner? Like, anything like that. Internal family conflicts. Family members may choose sides, leading to deep rifts and a loss of support when it is most needed. Stigma and isolation. There can be a social stigma surrounding murder, leading to friends and community members to distance themselves due to discomfort or fear of saying the wrong thing. This can make survivors feel judged and isolated. Identity crisis. Survivors may feel they have become different people, losing their former sense of self and having to reconstruct their life and worldview. Re-traumatization. The need to engage with the criminal justice system, police, court hearings, and media often forces survivors to relive the traumatic event, repeatedly hindering their healing process. And common mental health conditions and symptoms. Survivors are significantly higher risk for developing long-term psychological trauma. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Common symptoms include intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, nightmares, heightened anxiety, emotional numbness, and avoidance of reminders of the murder. Depression and anxiety. The overwhelming sadness often transforms into chronic hopelessness and pervasive anxiety, especially if the perpetrator is not apprehended. And physical ailments. Emotional stress can manifest physically, resulting in fatigue, sleep problems, appetite changes, heart palpitations, and other health issues. And substance abuse. Some survivors may turn to alcohol or drugs as a coping mechanism for managing their overwhelming emotions. And support and coping mechanism. Now here's professional and long-term support is crucial for recovery. Professional counseling, therapists, and counselors, especially those experienced with homicide victims, can help survivors process their complex emotions and develop coping strategies. Support groups. Connecting with other homicide survivors helps reduce feelings of isolation and validates their unique pain. And victim advocacy services. Organizations provide assistance in navigating the complex legal system and can offer practical help with things like funeral arrangements and cleanup services. National resources such as the Office for Victims of Crime and the National Organization of Parents of Murdered Victims or Murdered Children, excuse me. Let me re-say that. National Organization of Parents of Murdered Children offers specialized support and information for those impacted by homicide. And so that was that. And now let's dive into survivors of domestic violence related murders. So survivor of domestic violence related murders suffer severe complex mental issues, primarily post-traumatic stress disorder, severe depression, intense anxiety, and guilt, often compounded by social isolation and the trauma of witnessing or experiencing extreme violence, leading to nightmares, flashbacks, emotional numbness, and difficulty trusting, with some resorting to self-medication. The impact extends beyond immediate trauma, creating long term challenges like substance abuse, suicidal ideation, and chronic and physical symptoms requiring specialized holistic support beyond standard mental health care. Now, common impact. This is it's a very repeated, like, different mental health impacts, but you get the drift. So I'm gonna keep repeating it just to get the message across for people who are in different areas of grief when it comes to losing a loved one to murder. So post-traumatic stress disorder, high rates of PTSD, characterized by flashbacks, nightmares, hypervigilance, and avoidance of trauma reminders. Depression, severe depression is common with feelings of hopelessness, sadness, guilt, and worthlessness, sometimes leading to suicidal thoughts, anxiety and fear, persistent anxiety, intense fear, and a profound sense of unsafety are hallmarks often linked to the inability to control the situation. Emotional numbing, a coping mechanism where survivors feel detached, lost, or numb, making it hard to process emotion and complex trauma. See PTSD. Symptoms can often go beyond PTSD, causing difficulties with self esteem, identity, and relationship instability, as the abuse is often prolonged and pervasive. Now, specific challenges for domestic violence, murder survivors, self blame and guilt. Internalizing verbal abuse can lead to survivors to blame themselves, feeling they could have prevented the tragedy. Social isolation. Victims are often isolated, worsening mental distress and making it harder to seek help, especially if the violence was concealed. Excuse me. Substance abuse, a common coping strategy, but it further harms mental health and increasing risk for other issues and physical symptoms. Headaches, insomnia, chronic pain, and gastrointestinal issues are frequent as the mind and body are deeply affected. Now, support needs, integrated care, mental health services need to collaborate with domestic violence specialists to address the root cause. Trauma-informed therapy. Therapies tailored to complex trauma are crucial, recognizing that abuse might have been continuous rather than a single event. And economic and social support. Addressing underlying issues like unemployment or housing instability is vital for recovery and suicide prevention. Now, when no justice is served in the murder of a loved one, survivors experience a significant and prolonged mental health challenges, including complicated grief, chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, severe anxiety, depression, and profound sense of injustice and fear. The lack of legal resolution prevents them from achieving a sense of closure, hindering the healing process. Now, this is what all the research says. Prolonged complicated grief. Unlike typical bereavement, the grief after a homicide with no conviction is often prolonged and complicated by a lack of resolution. Ambiguous loss. Survivors may struggle to fully accept the reality of the loss or move on because the case remains open and unresolved. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Survivors are at a high risk for intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, nightmares, emotional numbness, heightened anxiety, and avoidance of reminders of the death. Depression and anxiety. The overwhelming sadness often develops into chronic depression and pervasive anxiety. Survivors may feel the loss of hope, joblessness, or housing insecurity as a result. Sense of injustice or frustration. Families often report a profound sense of injustice or dissatisfaction with the criminal justice system. They may feel the victim's life was devalued and that the perpetrator has gotten away with the crime, leading to anger toward the system and even themselves, ongoing fear and safety concern. When the perpetrator is at large, survivors often live in constant fear for their own safety and the safety of the remaining loved one. Now, social isolation and stigma. Homicide grief can be met with societal discomfort or silence, leading to isolation. Survivors may feel stigmatized or even blamed for the circumstances, especially in communities with high rates of violence, which hinders their ability to seek support. And physical health issues. The chronic stress and trauma can manifest physically, contributing to chronic illness, heart problems, sleep disturbances, and substance use issues. Now, supporting someone who has lost a loved one to murder involves your physical prioritizing your physical presence, offering practical help, and listening without judgment. The grief associated with homicide is complex, involving deep anger, a profound sense of injustice, and trauma, so your support should be patient and ongoing. Here's ways to offer some help. Be physically present. Your presence is the most important thing you can offer. Simply by being there, sit in silence, offer a hug, or hold their hand can be more comforting than the right words. Listen compassionately. Allow them to express their feelings, which may include intense anger, rage, confusion, and fear. Listen to their stories about the victim and the event as many times as they need to tell them, as repetition is a part of their processing. And validate their emotions. Reassure them that their intense feelings are normal and that there is no correct way to grieve. Avoid telling them how they should feel or putting pressure on them to be strong or move on. Offer specific practical help. Instead of saying, let me know if you need anything, make concrete offers. Grieving people often find it hard to ask for help. Bring food or drop off groceries, help with chores like cleaning, laundry, or running errands, assist with children or looking after pets, and offer to help with the legal processes, insurance forms, or go with them to appointments. And acknowledge the loss and the use of victims' names. Don't be afraid to talk about the person who died. Using their name acknowledges their importance and place in the family and helps them feel their loved one is not forgotten. And provide ongoing support. The initial shock may wear off for others, but the grieving person will need support long after the funeral. Check in regularly on important dates like birthdays, anniversaries, to let them know you still remember and care. And avoid cliches and platitudes. Phrases like everything happens for a reason, they're in a better place, or time heals all wounds can be very dismissive of their pain, and acknowledge how horrible the situation is. I'm sorry this happened is horrible injustice. Suggest professional help if needed. Be aware of the signs of overwhelming distress or inability to cope with daily activities, gently suggesting they speak with a bereavement counselor or explore local support groups for survivors of homicide can be helpful. When they are ready, you can help them find local support groups or professional resources. Resources which I will share in a little bit. So coping and healing. Healing is a long, nonlinear process that requires strong support systems. Survivors may find help through psycho-emotional support and counseling. Professional help is crucial for navigating trauma and grief. Support groups, connecting with others who have experienced similar losses can provide validation and reduce isolation. And advocacy and redefining justice. Some survivors find empowerment in advocating for their loved one or for changes in the justice system, which can help them regain a sense of control and purpose, even without a conviction. The resources are available to help navigate this process. The National Organization of Parents of Murdered Children provides support and resources for victim service. Information can often be found through the Office of Victims of Crime. Now, this next one I'm doing, because it goes along with the topic. And also, let me give you a bit of story time. Excuse me, my throat is very dry today. I should have had more water before I did this. But I'm trucking along. So, a few years ago, back in like 2014, 2013, I interviewed for a job with a man named Noah. He owns the fashion brand Can't Relate. If you've heard of it, if you haven't heard of it, it's a great brand. This was back in like 2014. But his backstory was he is a survivor of a murder victim due to gun violence, which was his brother. And I didn't get the job, but I still follow him on social media. I love how his brand is growing since the time I interviewed with him. It's called Can't Relate. I also follow his mother's foundation on Instagram called the Malik Adam James Foundation, which was created to help stop the growing gun violence. And They're doing great things, and I don't know them personally. I just spoke with him on the phone, but I follow them on social media. But like the little interaction I had with them really touched my heart. And I just thought I'd give a little shout out because they're doing great things. And I also know a few other people who are survivors of gun violence based murder victims. Like my sister's dear friend, she has worked with and known for years, named Laquana. She lost her son to a murder due to gun violence. I couldn't imagine losing a child like that. So even before I started working on this topic months ago, before this was even in like a blip on my radar of what I wanted to do for a future episode, I was like, okay, I want to do an episode. I'm thinking like doing an episode on people who have lost family members due to murder or homicide. I can't personally relate, but I know I have connected with those who do relate. And like it's so many people have lost a loved one due to homicide, and a lot people that I know specifically have lost them to gun violence. So let's dive into gun-based murders and mental health of their loved ones. So survivors of gun violence-based murders, including family members and community members, experience profound and lasting mental health consequences with significant rates of post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, substance use disorders. This trauma, often compounded by systemic inequalities, can persist across generations. Now, exposure to gun violence, whether direct or indirect, is a major risk factor for adverse mental health outcomes. Post traumatic stress disorder is one of the most common diagnoses among survivors, with studies showing nearly 50% of adult firearm injury survivors having probable PTSD compared to much lower rates in general population. Depression and anxiety, elevated levels of major depressive disorder, and anxiety are widely reported among both direct survivors and family members of victims. Um, for adolescents, proximity to a gun homicide has been linked to increased anxiety and depression symptoms. Substance use disorders. Survivors are at a significantly higher risk for developing alcohol and drug use disorders following an incident of gun violence. Disruptive behavior disorders. Youth survivors often experience an increase in disruptive behaviors and psychological distress and suicidal ideation. Exposure to fatal gun violence is associated with higher levels of general psychological distress, as well as an increased risk for suicidal thoughts and psychosis like experiences, and loss of safety and hypervigilance. A universal impact is an eroded sense of safety, leading to many survivors to live in a state of fear and hypervigilance. And the ripple effect of trauma. The effects of gun violence extend far beyond the immediate victim, creating a shockwave effect that impacts the families, first responders, and entire communities. Family members, particularly youth siblings and children of victims, experience mental health outcomes similar to even worse than direct survivors. Mothers who lose children to homicide often experience living death trauma, which can impact their children's well being as well. And communities. Communities disproportionately affected by chronic gun violence, often Black and Latin neighborhoods facing structural inequalities, experience a collective and historical trauma. This ongoing exposure can impact academic performance and create an environment of constant struggle to cope. Now, this is what the research says, and barriers to mental health care. Despite significant mental health needs, many survivors do not receive adequate support. There are often missed opportunities within the healthcare system to connect victims with services, and a need to exist for improved trauma-informed services and community-based mental health support is that is culturally competent and accessible outside of traditional hospital settings. And seeking support. Resources are available for survivors and their families. The National Alliance on Mental Illness provides information and support. The Mental Health America offers tips for coping with gun violence trauma, and organizations like Every Town for Gun Safety works to connect survivors with resources and amplify their voices. Now, also, the one I mentioned, let me repeat that. The one, the Malik, let me see what that was. It was Malik Adam James Foundation. Definitely look into that. They are a big proponent for advocating against gun violence. Yeah, so now let's dive into the self-care for murder-based grief, which okay. So self-care for murder-based grief involves nurturing your physical health, sleep, nutrition, exercise, expressing intense emotions safely, journaling, therapy, support groups, creating routines and boundaries using grounding techniques for trauma, breathing, mindfulness, and seeking specialized support for complex trauma and the justice system. Patience, self compassion, and allowing yourself to grieve uniquely are crucial to homicide grief, which is compounded by trauma, anger, and potential systemic involvement. Now, emotional and mental self care, seek therapy, engage in trauma informed counseling or family therapy for a non judgmental space, join support groups, connect with others who understand homicide loss, groups like those for homicide survivors. Express yourself, journal, write letters, create art, and talk to trusted people. Excuse me, I'm like all over the place today. Express yourself, journal, write letters, create art, or talk to trusted people to process feelings like intense anger or denial, and practice mindfulness. Use grounding techniques like deep breathing, body scans, or focusing on your senses to manage overwhelming emotions and set boundaries. Limit interactions with media, law enforcement, or even well meaning family or friends when needed, and physical routine and self care. Maintain a routine, establish basic structure, sleep, meals, exercise for a sense of control. Prioritize your health, eat well, get rest, and avoid relying on substances like alcohol or medication to cope, and create rituals. Honor your loved one with memorials, planting trees, and new traditions to say goodbye, and address trauma and justice system needs. Address trauma. Seek help for nightmares, flashbacks, or intense fear that are common after a violent death, and navigate the system. Get help with court appearances, legal information, or financial strain through specialized victim services. And key minds is be patient. Grief has no timeline except your unique pace. Be kind to yourself. Allow yourself to feel, even if it's anger or disbelief, it's a natural reaction to an unnatural event. And live for the living. Eventually finding joy again isn't a betrayal, but a step into healing. Excuse me. Crisis support. Call or text 988 for immediate confidential crisis support. Now, here are some resources for grieving survivors of murder victims. For immediate support and referrals for murder victims, call 988, the Suicide Crisis Lifeline, for 24/7 crisis support, or dial 211 for local information and referrals in most areas, connecting you with services like Victims Connect Resource Center, phone, chat, or text, or state specific victim assistance programs for tailored trauma. Some national crisis hotlines: 988, Suicide and Crisis Lifelines, dial 988. It's for the US and Canada for free confidential support 24/7, including those dealing with traumatic loss. Victim Connect Resource Center, National Center for Victims of Crime, offers referrals for over 200 languages via phone, chat, or text weekdays 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Local and state resources, dial 211. Call 211 in most U.S. areas to find local victim services, grief support, and mental health programs near you. Your state's victim compensation program. Search for your state's victim assistance, California Victim Compensation Program. And, that's an example. For financial and support services, specialized supports. National Organization for Victim Advocacy, NOVA, offers resources and support for victims of crime, including homicide survivors and various links. National Center for Victims of Crime provides resources for homicide and grief, connecting survivors to specialized help and how to find help. Call 988 or 211 for immediate crisis and local connections. Use Victim Connect for national language diverse support. And contact NCVC, excuse me, to find specific programs for homicide loss. Now, here are mental health support resources specifically for survivors of murder victims. The National Center for Victims of Crime, I think I shared this already. It is a comprehensive national resource with specific support for those grieving homicide loss, including guidance and coping. support options, and links to organizations that specialize in homicide survivor care. The number for that is 1-844-443-5732. You can call or text. Let me repeat that, 1-844-443-5732. You can call or text. And they also list organizations such as Parents of Murdered Children, support groups, advocacy, and connections to local chapters, and Justice for Homicide Victims, which is support and help navigating justice systems, and support groups and counseling programs. We have the Chicago Survivors for Illinois, provides crisis response, grief counseling, trauma-informed care, support groups, and coping skill building, advocacy, and practical assistance to family members of homicide victims. And the number for that is 877-863-6338. Let me repeat that. The number for that, the Chicago Survivors, is 877-863-6338. And now this is for survivor resources in Twin Cities, Minnesota. Nonprofit offering immediate crisis of long-term grief counseling, peer-led support groups, and advocacy for families and friends affected by homicide and other sudden death. It doesn't give me a number, but it is called the Survivor Resources in Twin Cities, Minnesota. Now we have bereaved survivors of homicide in Orlando, Florida, peer and professional facilitated support groups, in-person and Zoom individual family counseling. They have accompaniment of at trials, and education on grief and the justice system. They meet bi-weekly, and you can call 407-221-8845. The number for that is 407-221-8845. And then we have LOVS, which is Loved Ones of Victim Services. They support adults and youth 10 plus grieving the loss of a loved one due to homicide or violence with individual, group, and family counseling, art therapy, and grief coaching. Then we have the statewide homicide support group in North Carolina. There's monthly virtual support groups for loved ones of homicide victims, with trained facilitators helpful for connection, shared experience, and mutual support. Now here's the number is 919-831-2857, 919-831-2857, and the other number is 800-348-0824, 800-348-0824. And then we have the local law enforcement and DA victim services. Many police departments and district attorney offices assign victim witness advocates who offer emotional support, referrals to grief counseling, help with victim compensation, and support accompaniment. For example, Suffolk County, New York offers trained victim advocates and referrals for local resources like the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute. Check with the DA's office or victim services in your county or city for similar programs. Now, here are types of support available: crisis intervention and 24/7 hotlines, individual trauma-focused counseling, peer-led and professional facilitated support groups, family and youth grief counseling, support navigating the legal and criminal justice process, and advocacy and practical assistance, victim compensation, and court support. Now here is tips for finding local help. Contact victim services at your local police department, sheriff's office, district attorney. They often connected families with free counseling and support groups. Crime victim compensation may reimburse grief therapy costs. Ask your advocate or local victim services, and hospice and community grief centers sometimes offer general bereavement groups that can complement homicide-specific support. And if you're in immediate distress, if you're feeling overwhelmed, unsafe, or having thoughts of harming yourself or someone else, please reach out immediately to local emergency services, 911, or the crisis hotline in your area, or dial 988. Here are support groups from communities, specifically for survivors of murder and their loved ones, including national organizations with local chapters and peer-led grief groups, plus a few broader grief support options that may help. We have the National Support for Group Survivors of Murder, Parents of Murdered Children, POMC, national organization. It's a peer support network for family and friends of people killed by violence. POMC has chapters across the U.S. that hold regular monthly meetings, provide emotional support with helping navigate grief and the criminal justice system, and they offer accompaniment and more. And membership is open to all survivors, not just parents. And local POMC meetings in New York, for example, they have the Bronx chapter. It meets on the third Saturday 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Calvary Hospital in the Bronx, and the Long Island chapter meets on the second Sunday, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. at Mather Hospital in Port Jefferson, and the national phone number for it is 888-818-POMC, or the website is pomc.org. This is one of the largest and most widespread support groups for homicide survivors in the US, and the Mothers of Murdered Offspring, a peer-driven support organization originally started in Charlotte, North Carolina, focused on connecting and supporting families affected by murder and homicide laws. While local to North Carolina, they may offer referrals or connections to similar groups or resources. And we also have the Friends and Family of Murder Victims, a support group for anyone emotionally impacted by the murder of a loved one, offering ongoing emotional support and connection with others who understand homicide grief. And the regional virtual support you can access. Bereaved survivors of homicide in Orlando, Florida. They are on Zoom, a peer-driven, professionally facilitated support group for survivors and family and friends of homicide victims. It meets both in person and online via Zoom, so distance isn't a barrier, and you can contact them. The number is 407-221-8845. The number is 407-221-8845. And here are some additional support options. The Loved Ones of Victim Services. They offer group counseling for people who have lost loved ones to violent acts, including homicide, grief groups, as well as individual and family counseling and broader grief support groups. Even if not homicide specific, these grief groups are often helpful for processing loss, especially if you can't find a homicide only group nearby. Grief Share, it's called Grief Share. It's a support group held through local churches or online, focused on coping with the death of a loved one, and general grief support by crisis lines and local health systems. Many community hospitals and nonprofit centers offer ongoing grief groups called local providers to ask specifically about homicide grief and how to find more local groups. If you are near West Babylon or anywhere near New York, which is where I live, contact the New York State Office of Victim Services, OVS. Their Resource Connect can help you find local victim assistance programs that often include support groups and counseling services. And ask your local police department or district attorney's victim services unit. They frequently maintain lists of nearby support groups and homicide survivors, and search online for POMC chapters near you. Many groups have free monthly meetings with both local and Zoom options, and tips for participation. Support groups settings vary. Some may be peer-led, others facilitated by professionals. Both can be helpful, and virtual meetings like Zoom can be especially valuable if local in-person groups are limited. And no shame or pressure. It's okay to try more than one group to find the one that feels right for you. Now, this is the one I like to do based off of like helping with fight the stigma that comes with being a survivor of murder, being a loved one of a murder victim. Excuse me. Oh my god, my throat hurts. I talked a lot, but I'm doing this for good reason. Here are some famous people whose family members are victims of murder or homicide. We have Jennifer Hudson, the beautiful Jennifer Hudson. The Oscar and Grammy-winning singer and actress lost her mother, brother, and young nephew in a triple homicide in 2008. Her former brother-in-law was convicted of the murders. Kelsey Grammer, the star of Frasier and Cheers, had his sister Karen Grammer abducted, um, raped, and murdered by a serial killer in 1975. He was the one who had identified her body, an ordeal that profoundly affected him. His father had also been killed in an earlier incident. Mark Ruffalo, um, the actor, had his younger brother Scott Ruffalo murdered in an unsolved shooting in 2008. Tamron Hall, the talk show host and journalist, has spoken publicly about the unsolved murder of her sister. I think it's Renate. I don't want to butcher it. I'm not doing it on purpose. To advocate for domestic violence awareness, and we have John Walsh, the host of America's Most Wanted, became a prominent victims' rights activist after his 6-year-old son Adam was abducted and murdered in 1981. Though initially unsolved, law enforcement and Walsh considered the case closed, with serial killer Otis Toole as the perpetrator, and Michael Jordan, the basketball legend, had his father, James Jordan, murdered in a roadside robbery in 1993. 2 teenagers were convicted of the crime. And also, we have Ashton Kutcher. His close friend, Ashley Ellerin, was murdered in 2001. He was supposed to pick her up that night and later testified at the killer's trial. We have Rihanna, her cousin, Tavon Kaisine. I don't want to butcher this name, and I'm not doing it. I'm gonna say Tavon Kassine was murdered in Barbados in 2017. She publicly grieved him and has spoken about the violence in her community. Sharon Tate, her husband, director Roman Polanski, survived the brutal murder of his pregnant wife, Sharon Tate, and their friends by the Manson cult in 1969. 50 Cent, his mother was murdered when he was 8 years old in a drug-related fire, and he has spoken about the growing up without her and how it has shaped his life. And we have Tyler Perry. His close family members and friends were murdered due to domestic violence and community violence, deeply influencing themes of his work. We have Kelsey Ballerini. Her childhood friend was murdered in a school shooting, and she has spoken about survivors' guilt and trauma for the loss. And we have Danny Glover. His brother was murdered in a violent robbery. He later became an activist for victims of violence. Yeah, so why does this matter? This matters because even when someone is rich and famous or admired, murder grief does not go away. Survivors are often experience PTSD, survivor's guilt, anger, numbness, fear of losing more people. And you are not weak for feeling what you feel. This is trauma, not just sadness. And this is my favorite part of it. It is the affirmations. Now, for the shock and trauma, this is some affirmations. What was real? What happened was real, and it was not my fault. My body is reacting to trauma, not weakness. I'm allowed to feel unsettled, disoriented, or numb. My nervous system is learning how to feel safe again. I survived something that shattered my world. For grief that never ends, my love for them did not die with them. Grief does not mean I am broken, it means I love deeply. I am allowed to grieve in my own way, in my own time. There is no deadline on mourning. I carry them with me even as I keep living. For anger, guilt, and why, my anger is natural response to injustice. I did not cause what happened. I could not have controlled another person's violence. I don't have to forgive in order to heal. And I'm allowed to feel rage, sorrow, and love all at once. And when you are feeling unsafe in the world, right now in this moment, I am safe. The world changed, but I am still here. Um, I'm allowed to protect my heart and my boundaries. I do not have to live in constant fear to honor them. I am learning how to trust life again slowly. And for healing in the future, surviving this means I'm incredibly strong, even when I feel weak. Um, I'm allowed to have joy again without betraying their memory. Healing does not mean forgetting. I carry grief and still build a life. Oh, I can carry grief and still build a life. My life still has meaning, and for the love that remains, their life mattered, their story matters. My grief is proof of our bond. Love does not die, even when a person does. I honor them by continuing to breathe. Now, here's something I found that was helpful. And this is something that's going to be helpful. Grounding for when trauma hits. When someone is murdered, the brain stays in survival mode. These help bring you back to the present when memories, panic, or numbness show up. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 reset. You say their name, 5 things you see, 4 things you feel, 3 things you hear, 2 things you smell, and 1 thing you taste. Say it out loud, and if say it out loud if you can. It tells your nervous system, I am here, I survived. The cold water reset. Splash cold water on your face or hold something cold in your hand. This activates vagus nerve, and which calms trauma panic. Excuse me. Bear with me, guys. Hand to heart breathing. Put one hand on your chest, on your stomach. Slowly inhale through your nose for 4. Hold 2. Exhale through your mouth for 6, and repeat 5 times. Your body needs to feel contained. And when grief hits out of nowhere, say quietly, "This wave will pass. I am not losing my mind, I am grieving. My love is looking for somewhere to go." And let yourself cry if it comes. Holding it in makes trauma louder. And when anger, guilt, or if only takes over, these thoughts are trauma trying to make sense of the chaos. You can say things like, "I did not cause this. I could not control another person's violence. My mind is searching for safety, not truth. You did the best you could with the information you had at the time. And when the world feels unsafe, your brain learned people can disappear in a moment. That doesn't mean danger is everywhere. Try this. Look around and say, right now in this moment I am safe." Repeat it 3 times. You are not dishonoring them by wanting to feel safe. And for nightmares and flashbacks and intrusive images, excuse me, sit up, look at something solid in the room, say your name, today's date, and where you are, and put your feet on the floor. Trauma lives in the body. This brings you back to now. And it's when you feel different from everyone else, because you are. Everyone is unique in their own way. Murder creates before and after. Say, "I am not weak. I am injured by trauma. I'm allowed to need more gentleness now. My reactions make sense given what I lived through." And this is for court dates, anniversaries, and triggers. Those dates reopen the wound, and before them say, "This day is hard because I love deeply. I will get through this hour. I don't have to be okay. I just have to breathe." After them, drink water, eat something, sit somewhere quiet. Your body just went through emotional danger. And for the love that didn't die. People worry that healing means forgetting, and it doesn't. Say things like, "I carry them with me. Their life mattered. Their story is not over because I remember." And love doesn't disappear, it changes form. And one last thing. Survivors of murder victims often feel invisible, misunderstood, abandoned by the world, and stuck between grief and rage. You are not broken. You went through something no human nervous system was designed to handle, and you are still here. And if you ever want to talk about who you lost, just know that they mattered. Now, I hope I covered everything for you guys. I'm so glad to be back. And next episode will be about ADHD. I will drop new episodes every Friday. Now, this one, I didn't drop on a Friday because I wanted to dive right back into it. I got word about Spotify dropping the ads on like Thursday, and I was like, I need to get back to it. I wrote the episode today, and I wanted to dive back into it, but every episode I will drop on a Friday, God willing. You never know. So yes, I want to stick to that schedule. I've been wanting to come back, but I needed a platform. But by the grace of God, Spotify did the right thing and cut ties with the ISAs, and I'm glad to be back. And me leaving was based on principles and beliefs. And just remind yourself, this too shall pass. I know we are living in tough times, and mental health is being affected by everything going on. Just remind yourself, it will get better, and this too shall pass. I promise you, this will not last forever. I just want to hug. I really want to hug everyone. Like, honestly, if I could just do one big hug, everyone going through it right now, honestly, I could. We all need a hug collectively. Um, but I'm back and I'm ready to help you guys again and do some more of this. Like I said, I do this without pay, and I do this because I want to help. And I love those who support me. So if you or anyone you know is struggling, text HOME to 741-741, the crisis text line, for a free confidential conversation with a trained counselor at any time of day. Text or call 988 or use the chat function at 988lifeline.org. 988 continues to offer support to anyone who needs it, but no longer offers specialized LGBTQ plus support. You can contact the Trevor Project directly 24/7. You can call 1-866-488-7386 or text START to 678-678 or connect online at trvr.org/get-help. The same free secure support as always. You can find more resources at thejedfoundation.org/crisis. And the new lifeline for the LGBTQIA plus given by Canada is 1-877-330-6366. And you can call the NAMI helpline at 800-950-6264, or you can text the NAMI at 62640. Now, thank you guys for listening. It feels so good to be back. Um, see you guys next time. Remember, this too shall pass. I love you guys. Stay well. Bye bye. Oh, that was a lot. Oh, my throat.